sorry, extra hard if a child on the spectrum, has trouble verbally communicating. It can be really hard to know what's getting in and how things are connected. The best way that we know when you know that episodic memory is formed correctly is when the person has the same reaction they did during the activity. So, like, for example, you go on a roller coaster and, Samara really likes it and she's laughing and, fun. And when you bring up the roller coaster again, she has some sort of observable reaction, similar to what it was on the ride. I mean, not the exact same, but something similar. And that's one way you can tell if, a memory like that was encoded. Whether she can say it or not, there are other ways of observing it. Now, the trick is that what she's encoding at any given time, you don't always know. And it could be something very different than what we are in that moment. So,
right.
You went to
we all experience things differently.
Right, yeah. And even though something would be, we experience it differently, but something you might think is more obvious, like, you went to the park and maybe like the highlight for everyone was, you saw someone horseback riding in the park and it was kind of like, whoa, that's unusual, and it evoked something. Just because that really stood out for maybe a majority of people doesn't necessarily mean it stood out for her. Even when it's something more like contextually obvious in a group. So the way that we help support the development of episodic memory is really spotlighting. So spotlighting relevant moments from our perspective, but that doesn't mean it has to be meaningful to her.
Right.
It's okay if it's not.
Right.
Yeah, just because we find something, very exciting or interesting doesn't mean she has to, but it's still important, especially if it's kind of collectively relevant. It's still good to highlight to her, let's say, yeah, someone's riding a horse in the park. Wow, that is so strange. We never see that, because that's something in a group that would probably be that was just so unusual that it would stand out in sort of a cool, weird way, of course, taking a lot of pictures, having these visuals is really important because it can trigger certain memories. So having her take pictures in your activities, and I think maybe I wrote that in maybe I meant to, one of the texts or the emails. Her taking pictures of things and events will give her some empowerment of what she's focusing on. So maybe, and that's the thing, maybe you would have taken a picture of something very different. And so if you're reviewing it with her at the end of the day, even though it's, likely quite relevant to her, she may not have been as present to it. So it could be interesting maybe even for you each to take pictures of certain parts of your day. And you can even share it as, this was something important to me today. Or this is something I noticed when we were at the park, and she can take a picture of something she's noticing, because that's going to be more meaningful to her and help her process things, coming from a lot better.
So it's really it's not like anything is necessarily broken. It's really about just being present. And if they've got stuff going on in their head, or self-talk and things like that, then they're just not present and they're just kind of missing what's going on.
Yeah. And so
it's not that they can't do it, it's just
it's
all about being present.
Exactly. It's being present, but also noticing what is relevant and what may not be. So it's present, but it's also filtering. And that's why spotlighting is important, because sometimes they can be very present, but they don't exactly know what is supposed to stand out either. So everything might be coming in sort of equally important. And so the memories that we might develop, because we have a different filtering system, are going to be different because everything might seem equally just, maybe nothing stands out. So they're present, but nothing really.
Then where does that fall into? I was going to ask you that too, like, so I'm reading about the different types of memory. So, like, when you just talk about like the general mom question, right, when kids come home from school, what did you learn in school today? Or just kind of those general recollections of what you're doing, but it's not necessarily emotional, or it's not necessarily. Does that fall into the autobiographical, or?
No, see that, okay, no, that's a good question. So here's the thing. So there's different, some of it is semantic memory, just based on like a language trigger. Like you think of school and then maybe I went to recess. Kids might go, well, we had recess, we had lunch. A lot of times kids will say it that way, for a lot of different reasons. But anyway, it could be procedural memory. Like, what did you do today? Well, I ate breakfast, I went to school, I came home, I played, the procedures. So there's semantic memory, there's associative memory, like, okay, what goes with a fork? Spoon. There's all of those types of memory.
I read about semantic, autobiographical, the episodic, and just the executive functioning.
Oh, okay, so those are all the more higher, those would be the higher levels. So like,
where does just your regular?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they're all, they're kind of integrated because there's sensory memory, and that's where you're processing information in the environment, and it's kind of like more of a brief, and this is where it's so jumbly for people on the spectrum because you don't know as far as how they're processing sensory information, visual information, auditory information. It's all interconnected, and you can't really go inside the brain to see how long one is.
My other thing is, how does anybody even know this?
I know. Well, part of what they've done, I know, right?
They don't communicate well. How could they even possibly know?
It's kind
how could they possibly know what she really is taking in or not taking in?
Well, that's true. I mean, you really don't, but the cues from her can help. So, but sensory memory, to a degree, we all experience sensory memory. It's taking in the environment. The thing is that for some people, maybe people on the spectrum, it overtakes them a little bit more. They might be more sensitive. So where we can walk in and maybe we smell like a stinky smell or the lights are really bright, we have a very rapid adjustment to it. So we're taking it in, we take note of it, we're over it. We're on to the next, So for people on the spectrum, it may be so overcoming to them that it's really hard for them to, their brain space is taken up much more by it. That's part of it. And then there's, auditory sensory memory, and that's more like, information that you hear. So if you think of somebody, and this is where slowing down is so important on so many levels, but if you can imagine somebody who maybe has a sensitive sensory system and has maybe an auditory processing challenge, it's like, okay, they're dealing with what's going on around them in the environment, and then somebody's talking to them, and they need a lot more time to organize, sometimes, depending on what it is. So, with the visual sensory memory, that's also being able to like hold a picture in your mind of something if someone's talking to you. So this relates to possibly, maybe, with the books, reading the books. It's possible that and watching her, the last two videos were really awesome. They were really, really good. Clearly she we know she understands the questions. The tricky part for her is not having that visual support.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder, okay, is she able to hold in her mind like the information she sees and process it like maybe she's not able to hold that picture in her mind and then answer the question. Maybe
So
that's
being able to hold a picture in her mind when you say like a word, like she can't, or I'm not sure what you mean.
yeah, like oh, okay, so you read a page, like, you know, the bear's holding a basket. And if she's not directly like focused on the bear's holding a basket, looking at it, I don't know if she can keep it in her mind if she's not visually focused on it. So, like if you were to show her the page and then you're just talking about it, you know, I don't know if in her mind she can go, oh yeah, oh the bear's holding the basket, and who's holding the basket? Oh, the bear. You know, like if she doesn't have the visual to put in her mind, that could be something. I mean, I don't know, it's possible. Because it wouldn't be too shocking to think that holding visual representations of things could be a challenge for people on the spectrum. And that's why visually it's so helpful for her. It could be, I mean, she's very smart so much that she's probably knowing that that's what helps her. She's like developing her own strategies in a way. Like when I see it, it helps me. It could be that her mind has trouble holding on to representation. That could be. I mean, I don't know how much of that with auditory processing. I don't really understand auditory processing, the degree, you know, that.
They were doing, last session, they did some cards. Samara. It's too loud. Can you turn it down just a little bit, please? Thank you. They were doing some cards where they had two words that sounded similar, and they had visual pictures with the word. So the word was printed, and then there was a picture of what it was. I can't remember the other word now, but they had sack and then something else that sounded like it. And we don't use the word sack.
Yeah.
We say bag. You know?
Sure.
But she was getting them all right until she got to that one. And how did they word the question? But she was asking for her to pick one card or the other. And she obviously didn't know the word sack. And so she picked the other card, and it was the wrong one. And Jen said to me, she said, do you guys use the word sack? And I was like, no. So she had the visual of like a paper sack, but she didn't pick. I wish I could remember what she said for the question that would make her pick sack. But
so what were the goal, or what were they trying to do with that exercise?
I assume they don't really have time to like tell me what they're doing or explain anything. But I assume they were just trying to see if she was processing, because I told her that sometimes I'll say something and she'll think it's something else that sounds really familiar, really similar. And so I think they're trying to see
decipher
similar sounding words, if she's really hearing all of the
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
well,
correctly.
That's really helpful, because that can also help sort of narrow down some of what we're talking about too. I mean, in some ways, because
she does that quite a bit. Like even one day, I'll never forget it. It was so funny because I told her we were going to the dollar store, and so we pull into the parking lot, and there's like Walmart, and then there's like Dollar Tree at the end, and she starts getting upset in the back, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And I couldn't get her to say anything. She was just upset, and she starts going, "Dinosaur, dinosaur! We're going to the dinosaur."
Oh!
Dollar store, dinosaur.
Okay.
Stuff like that happens all the time.
So here's the question. Okay, so I mean, and it could be a little bit of a few things, but it's like, okay, the auditory processing versus, you know, how present is she to really be processing something at any given time? Because I've, you know, had experiences too where, and they're sort of, I mean, it's always hard to tell, like, are they really paying attention? Are they not? Like, you don't always know. But sometimes their attention is kind of in a halfway sort of state where they're not fully present to what's being talked about in the context and all the other stuff you might be saying around it. Like, we're going to the dollar store to buy, X, Y, and Z. And all they picked up was dollar store, but sounds like dinosaur and who knows what. I mean, it's really tricky. But it's good that they're doing that in speech because I think that it gives, some information about how she's processing, auditory things. But I do think that but being present, slowing down, that's always going to be helpful to really anything you're going to support for her. So there are things, it's really interesting because you read about those people on the spectrum who have these savant-like memory, right? Where they can, I have
stuff without any effort.
It's wild. I have an adult that I work with. If you give him any dates, like in history, he'll tell you what day of the week it was.
Yeah. I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday. There are a couple of autistics that live in Australia, I think, and they started this podcast. But they were talking about that. They were actually referencing to the movie Rain Man, and I think the person that was based off of. They were talking about that, and then the one podcaster, he said, I can't even remember what I did yesterday. There's this huge, difference.
Yeah. Well, I know it's
doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is
right.
that way.
Well, they say about 3% of the population is savant. Now, you can have savant abilities and not have autism. I mean,
Right.
And it's but the thing is that is a very different part of the brain. It's like, so when brains are working differently, different areas are strengthened. Autism is a lack of, neural integration, different parts communicating with each other. Sometimes different areas grow really strong. When it comes to autism, because they're not experiencing their experiences and because of the way typically autism is treated, they form a lot stronger semantic memory, procedural memory, or associative memory. So it's like I've tried to have conversations with some of my older kids who've been through ABA their whole lives, and I'll say, let's talk about, where you like to go to eat, like restaurants. And instead of discussing restaurants, they list, Olive Garden, Red Lobster, Lone Star, McDonald's. That's the memory they have of discussing things, right? Because it's not really discussing anything. It's just memorizing. That's associative memory. Restaurants. And we all, here's the thing, is that bad? No, because if someone were to ask us, where do you want to go eat? You're going to start, restaurants, you're going to filter through. But the difference is once you do that, you're also going to have kind of shift over to more episodic memory, where it's like, I would list McDonald's because I know that's a restaurant, but at the same time, my personal reaction would be like, yeah, I'm definitely not going there, versus just listing it out. But those are very basic kinds of memories. And like small, like babies, they learn to associate like, fork and spoon or, apple, banana, you're trying to teach them basic things, but they learn it in more natural ways. I mean, you're not typically sitting there.
Like Samara with flashcards, ABA.
But then you have the semantic memory, which is a little more sophisticated because it's more about general information or facts or data. It's not super personal, but there's more variety to it. But it's also just very general. And so episodic is more, there's a personal spin to it. Same with the autobiographical. It's the encoding, it's the processing of how did I feel in that event.
Yeah, it was a little fuzzy to me, the difference between the autobiographical and the episodic. because I read, they said like, you might, autobiographical would be more like you remember the name of the street of the birthday party you went to versus actually the memory of the party or emotions you're experiencing that. But that still sounds more like, I don't know.
The two of them are often used interchangeably. There are differences between them. I think the key, as far as I understand it, is when you think of episodic, the word episode is in there.
Yeah.
The autobiographical, I think, has more of like a flow, like it's probably more like a collection of the episode.
Because it sounded more like data to me, you know, it sounded a little bit more
like
emotional.
But I think that it's tricky because at that level, I mean, here's the thing. It's just like with all the other stuff you've learned about with autism is it's assumed that this type of these developmental memories have been put in place. So, like, for example, you know, you have a child who's like 4, 5, 6 and older or whatever. It's assumed that they would have episodic memory and be able to share relevant things or identify relevant. When I say relevant, meaning like contextual with groups of people or something that could be a connection point. So, like, for example, I have I can't remember who this was, but in the past we were looking at photos with somebody that I work with of his grandmother's 80th birthday party. And the thing is, it was like this big, giant surprise. Like, the whole thing was, it was a surprise. So for months, it was like secrets and, you know, just, and we can't wait to see what, you know, her reaction's going to be, this whole thing. And so it was this big to-do. The grandma walks in, it's a whole, like, you know, and she's like crying and happy. It's like, you know, this whole big thing. So they captured it. They took a picture of the moment that the grandma came in and had the reaction. And when they showed him the picture, he goes, "Oh, look, there's red balloons." So his first thought was going directly more to, you know, more of a semantic, logistic part of a party. Yeah, there's balloons. You know, it wasn't a wrong answer, but collectively it impacts a person socially, because it's like, well, this is where misunderstandings can happen. But grandma's the most important part here. Like, why are you looking at balloons?
And you know, how old is this person now?
Like 8.
I don't know, but kids aren't kids more.
Yeah, but if I were to show that to probably anybody over 4, they would have had the grandma came, oh, grandma was surprised. You know, they would have that emotional, as long as they were involved the same way this kid was. I mean, if they weren't involved in the whole, purposely we involved him, like the surprise was the big deal, you know? Be like, because that was definitely, even the visual was centered. Like the balloons were like on the side.
Gotcha.
Young kids, yeah, maybe they'd be like, "Oh, cake, balloons," you know. Yeah, but a little bit older, you know, it was like, okay, and it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was information that, wow, he really didn't process the emotions and the highlight of that social activity with the activity.
But is that about being, that's not really about being present, right? Because he was present.
Well, here's the thing. He was physically present.
No, I mean mentally present.
Yes, but mentally, it's hard to say in that moment, like, either A, was he very overwhelmed by all of the, I mean, it was like a very big party. His parents did the very best they could to support him in that moment, but they were also present to the moment. So was he just so overstimulated that it couldn't get captured because it was too much of a challenge to be that present in that moment? Maybe. He would be able to, I mean, I think he was present to the capacity that he could be given all the stimulation. But that would be an example of kind of more of a higher level of challenge for someone who gets overwhelmed pretty easily too. You know, if it was just maybe daddy's coming home and we made him a special dinner versus like 50 people, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's always kind of those different variables. But the other thing is, if mom or dad possibly were literally more present to him than they were the situation, maybe they, you know, maybe it would have helped for him to either be more up close or, I mean, it was kind of a big deal. It was a big party. So, but the thing is that that's also real life. It's good to know that, you know what, they have to enjoy their experiences too. They can't be so focused on him that they missed out the whole thing. But it does go to show that it's not that he doesn't care about grandma.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So the people in the family were misunderstanding, like,
yeah.
And that's where it gets a little bit, you know, it's like, oh no, he does care. No, he just wants the balloons and the cake. No, that's what he's able to process when he's in this moment, you know. So,
So the question is, if you do these, if you try and spotlight things to kind of narrow that down for them, do they eventually somehow learn how to do that on their own? Because obviously there's not going to always be someone around to do that for them every day, to remember this every day, right? And
no, that's true. Well, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, what I think is learned, as far as like I understand it, is that they learn to what you're trying to do by the process in its entirety. So slowing down, observing, referencing, all of those things lend a hand to someone to be able to process better most relevant situations on their own. The other piece to that, though, is also, and as Samara gets older, it's more and more important, but that self-advocacy piece. So, like, for example, if a person knows they get really overwhelmed at big parties, if you know that about yourself, you know that maybe you're not going to catch, like, every social nuance that's going on. That's okay. It's in part a combination of developing dynamic connections, habitually referencing and co-regulating, because that's how you do learn to attend to most relevant things, is that habit. But then that, with the combination of just knowing yourself later in life, you will do it much better, but you'll also understand yourself well enough to know that there are situations that are too overwhelming, or you need to make an adjustment for yourself, or just part of that self-advocacy piece. So it's not maybe going to be like, it's not equal to...
It's not like a muscle, you flex it and it's stronger it gets. It's not like that. It's just awareness. Being aware of your awareness.
That's how we develop it, though. I mean, it's the same thing. So we have a guide. We learn to co-regulate. We reference. We start experiencing things in a more connected way. That's how we learn it. But, the difference for someone on the spectrum is they may have, it's not as easy. They have competing factors in the brain that might be naturally pulling them away from some of those tendencies. So it's not like a perfect sort of solution, but you are kind of living in a way and interacting with practices those moments out differently. So, a really good practice, I think, and I'm glad that you have already been doing it, but I think focusing on spotlighting important moments, and you don't want to overdo it in the day. You want
Oh yeah.
episodic memory. Not everything can be a really like moment.
Right.
But having her, you know, be involved on some level too, like spotlighting for her, but maybe either take a picture or have some sort of representation.
So it's better for her to like, which makes sense, for her to be a part of that process rather than me. Like, you know, it's usually just I take video of stuff and then I show it to her later. So
well, that's still good. I mean, that's still good too. No, it's good because then I know for her and how she processes. Think about the power of the video, though. I mean, as far as her being able to reflect on it differently versus being in the, and that can be powerful for all of us. So I think that's still okay. But I do think adding an element of kind of, and this is a really good, a tricky balance because you want to give her an opportunity to, you know, I guess be involved in whatever's important to her in that moment.
Right. So it's more her experience too, right?
Yeah.
Goes back to experience sharing and all of that, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So now for some people, it could be a photo, it could be a video, it could be an item. So like, let's say, you know, you go to this really cool restaurant, it's really exciting, and, you know, like the sugar packets have the logo of the restaurant. Maybe it's a matter of taking the sugar packet home as a trigger for the memory of the restaurant. You know, if that, it's about a representation. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a photo or video. Those are usually the most common and kind of easy to process. But sometimes other things can trigger those memories
You
too.
say that because one thing I've noticed about her, and I don't know, she, like the items that have been most important to her were all things that had an experience around them. Just like her cookie, you know, her cookie?
Yeah.
She got that cookie at the fair. The fair was closing up, and we were gonna do, it was a fishing game.
Yeah.
But they were closing down, and the guy's like, "Oh no, we're closed." I was like, "Oh, sorry, Samara." And he could tell that I had my autism monitor. He's like, "Oh, I have this cookie. She can have this," and he gave it to her, and she just.
He did?
Yeah, that's where she got that cookie. But most of the things, and like her bear, she got that from her aunt.
Yeah.
She also had this little koala bear that we got when we were traveling to San Diego at a gas station. This biker gave it to her. Samara was getting in the car and she slipped and she like hurt her knee. And the guy came over and he's like, "Oh, here," and he gave her this little, you know, the little koalas with the little squeezy arm. Yeah, I gave that to her, and she packed that around for a while too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? So this is interesting information. So maybe for her, maybe items are something that is going to speak to her differently, you know, in some situations. I don't know. Like, I mean, you do want to be careful not to always seek an item.
Yeah, you don't want to have a collecting problem.
But you know, like even, you know, like, and if you think about too, like with kids, like they go to, like I've taken Maddie and Jazzy hiking and they enjoyed the hike and it was fun. And, you know, for me, I want the pictures. Oh, we're at the top, you know, but for them, it was all about, can we take a rock? Can we take a rock home? You know, and I was like, well, okay, just a small one, you know, but it's like, you know, sometimes that just means whatever it means. And you know what, maybe if I was 6 or 10, I would have felt maybe that same way. Pictures.
Did you collect rocks when you were a kid?
I didn't collect them, no.
Oh, I did.
But shells. No, shells on the beach, I did. Shells. But it's like, you know, but for different experiences, different ages, you know, she might connect differently to certain things. Even like, you know, so I think that just kind of maybe also keeping your eyes open to different possibilities. Like I like to save, I went to Disneyland a couple weeks ago with my cousins and I saved the map to the park, and part of me is like, gosh, I don't need any more junk. Like, I'm such a collector of like memory things. But I was like, I want to circle all the things that I did that day. And I don't know why. Like, it's kind of silly, and, you know, will I die if I throw it out? No. But it just kind of felt like I want to keep that and remember all the rides we did, you know? So, you know, for things that you guys do here, you know, whether it's, you know, it could be just little brochures, it could be kids menus, it could be something. I mean, if you feel like there's some kind of something you could also like show her, you know, like that's a connection of some sort. You know, but you can also tell her, you can use words like when you're out, you know, I want to remember this. This is a special day. This is so much fun. I want to remember it. You know, you can use that type of language, and you can say, you know, I want to get a picture. And then you can say, here, I want you to remember this special day too. You get a picture, you know, or however, kind of just to kind of test it out a little bit and see how she, you know, processes that. But I do think it's very good that at the end of the day you review the day with her. That's always positive.
Well, and not answers, like I try and ask her, like, what'd you do today? And she just gives me the day of the week. You know, Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
I've never been able to, but when I do the books, I feel like she's understanding when you say, like, what is, and, you know,
yeah,
about what. So I don't know if it, you know, and I thought, well, maybe it's the, you know, the auditory part. And so, well, but now I'm wondering if it's the memory related part, not the auditory part, not the understanding of what a what is, but what the question is. But maybe she can't remember. I don't know.
It could be that.
That's why I was like, where do all the mundane tasks of the day fall into memory? And should, you know.
Well, that's more like semantic and procedural. Those aren't bad things, but you can highlight those for her.
So or is she just like, well, I guess she wouldn't answer with the day of the week, though, if she didn't want to tell me. You know, like, why did I tell you what I did today?
Yeah. Right? Well, because and some kids don't, you know, a lot of kids are like, whatever. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that it's still good for you always, number one, to model. You can say something like, you know, oh, I'm thinking about our day. We had, you know, breakfast together. We made a volcano. We went to In-N-Out Burger. You know, you can model that for her so she can see what it looks like for you to remember the day.
Well, I do that. I was doing that without individuals.
Okay.
And it wasn't working.
Okay.
She still just wasn't understanding.
Oh, okay. Well, then, I mean, the whole idea behind, we want to think about how we can support her in understanding. And if that means she does need visuals to understand and process, then that's something good to do. So maybe you have little representations, whether it's pictures or In-N-Out Burger or something, you know, just like, you know, I want to remember the day. So there's that, but then there's also what I loved about the day or what my favorite part about the day was. That's a little bit different. So, you know, but just modeling and showing her in visuals somehow, this was our day. This was, you know, Tuesday, and then here's what we did. And then maybe you can, after that, you can share with her what the special part was and have a special part. And you can let her know that your special parts might be different or they might be the same. And that's okay. Either way is okay.
Okay.
So, I mean,
and there have been times where she's recalled stuff. So I thought, well, maybe she doesn't. I never thought she had this issue until recently, I guess.
Yeah.
It was the one day that totally shocked me, like 2 or 3 months ago when we went to the chiropractor, and there was a new chiropractor in there, and she was trying to talk to Samara, and she said, "What did you do today?" And she said, "I went to the dentist. I went home, and now I'm here," or something like that.
You said that?
Yeah, I told you about it, but it was brief.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
a while ago. But yeah, I was totally shocked because she'd never said anything like that before. And I was like, oh, she's processing her day. You know, she's processing what's going on. And it was nothing, I mean, phenomenal. You know, I don't know. So like, why did she process that? But
Well, and here's the thing. I mean,
can't tell me she played video games all day or whatever she did when I'm at work, you know?
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you know, it's hard to say because, I mean, one thing that you can kind of count on for someone with autism is being consistently inconsistent at times, I guess you could say. I mean, there's so many factors that can affect processing in any given moment, even in a moment where somebody is as present as they can be. I mean, if you think about, for us, the degrees, our threshold degrees are less sensitive in some ways, but like when I'm really tired, even if I'm giving my absolute best focus, sometimes it's just not going anywhere. Like, you know, or if I'm distracted because I'm worried about something or thinking about, you know, like lately with, you know, my dog, it's like, oh my gosh, and I have abilities to regulate myself. I have all these, it still can be really hard. So it's hard to say how day-to-day life can affect the ability to, you know, kind of retrieve, recall, and express things. It's really hard to say. And those are things you can't really say. I mean, every day might be a little bit different, but it's, you know, part of guiding too is just making the adjustments, slowing down, stepping in where you have to, pulling back where you can. It's like this dance, you know, of how can I offer support for her to be, you know, a successful processor without over prompting or over telling her something that's not hers, versus being too far back to where she has no support at all. So the best you can do is like kind of adjust that balance, offer some support where you can, and give time and really observe her. That would be something good to videotape, like at the end of your day when you're reviewing the day with her. If you want to record that and send it to me, yeah, that would be helpful. You know, some of those things, it's hard to say, but what we do know is that, but episodic memory is one of the more sophisticated. Humans don't start developing that till they're like a year and a half old. So a lot of the other memory, the procedural, the associative is first, semantic, procedural, those things, those more basic memories, those are developed much, much younger. And that's with the assumption that they can focus and process and organize. You know, the files in their brains develop so differently. They're much more organized than for people on the spectrum. If you think like all these files in the brain, like we have pretty good file cabinets with files, and you know, I imagine sometimes that, like, can you imagine just like a slew of papers, and you're just, every time someone asks you something, you have to like.
Yeah, I think that's my brain.
But you know, I mean, it's like more of an extreme for them, where it's like, wow, I don't have an organized filing system. Sometimes it's just easier to just sit there and just like, I don't know if I can sort through all the papers, you know. So, but I would start with that. The other things we can do too is like making like memory books for different things that could help her with the file system part of it, like, you know, going on certain outings and making it fun. And it doesn't have to be so, you know, stiff, but you know, like some of the projects that you do, you know, we did science projects, and you have your, you know, these different things that you do together, just so that you can
like everything practically.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, those are some some other ideas, but I would try just, maybe starting with the day. But even too, you could break it up like, I mean, I don't know how many things you end up in your day at the end of the day, but during the process, you can also be reviewing with her during the process. Like, oh, we just had lunch. Okay, so we had lunch. Now it's time for X. And then after X, you can say, okay, so we had lunch. We did our reading. Now it's time for, OT. It's like, okay, we had lunch. We did reading. We had OT. And now it's time for this, so you can kind of help her get an idea of how it goes throughout the day, not just at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, all of those things have already happened.
Right.
So
don't worry, we will have our race.
That's another thing to potentially, consider, but yeah, I think having her involved the best you can is good. And even if you end up with like lots of pictures, you can get them printed and put like books together. You can do that part together. That goes a long way sometimes too, depending on what it is. I mean, you'd want to do that for very special things. Yeah. So, oh, by the way, or if I can't, you guys go to the pumpkin patch, right, every year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Groupon is starting to have like deals for different pumpkin patches. I was gonna tell everybody. I don't know. I know they're all over the valley, but
we went to Schnepp Farms, I think, last year. That was
okay. Yeah, they're starting to have some different good like Groupon deals and stuff. So I was like, oh. This is a great time of year too for episodic memory. There's so many like emotionally charged activities and sensory type of things. And
when we've been doing, since we're big into Halloween, we've been doing the Spirit Halloween stores and stuff. We've already And when I've got the video up, but we did one. I don't know which store it was, but she actually brought me over to the animatronic clowns, and we'd already looked at them. But she's like, "How about this ones?" And I didn't know what she was. I just thought she wanted to go look at them again. But she took my phone from me because I had been videoing it for the vlog. And she took the phone from me and she wanted to video it, and so she did, and I helped her. And then she's like,
good.
Let's go over to this one, and she went over, and I have it on there. It says Samara Cam. Yeah, and she wanted to do.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
That's very cool. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and when
the spirit store.
Remember in that one video we did of reading the books at the end, she was like, "Now how about Halloween store video?"
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, do you always go to the same spirit store, or do you go to
different ones? We've been to 3 so far.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was gonna say that's like just a great way of like same but different, expanding,
Yeah,
and noticing what's the same and what's different too.
Mm-hmm. There's a display in the back of the store now this year where you walk into the display and they've got like black lights and stuff.
Yeah.
She saw Matt go in there and she was absolutely terrified. She was pulling me away from it. She still won't go in there. But when she was watching, I went back there later and just videoed inside. And so when I replayed the video and she was watching it, and she's seen her face because it was part she didn't remember, and she was just really into it, like never seen that before. And watching the video of what I took inside the park that she did.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, the other thing to remember with all this memory stuff too is sometimes it's not always obvious, but sometimes the level of anxiety or just energy it takes to be okay in a situation is what is the main priority for a person at that time. And so for us, we don't experience it quite that way. And so the frequency of their really meaningful experiences is probably a little different. You know, where if you had a whole day of activities and everything, and you had episodic memories about every single one, you know, depending on how, you know, whatever level of nervousness or processing or anxiety she may have, it may not be quite the same. But that doesn't mean that she can't develop episodic memories. It just means that sometimes her brain space is filled with other things, and it's not always, maybe the frequency isn't going to be as high, or the quantity, you know.
Right.
But with episodic memory, it's really about quality. It's not how many great, exciting, you know, personal memories we can have per se. It's just the quality of them can be so meaningful that, you know, no matter what they are, and some things can be quite really insignificant to like an outside person, but maybe on the inside meant something so personal and amazing to a person. So and I know you would never do this, so it's always important, like whatever her memory is always important. It's not like try to change it.
Right.
You can always expand and like share your perspective, but that doesn't mean whatever she noticed was
Not important.
You know, not important or not significant. Yeah. So, and also it can be very telling too when you start to kind of, I don't know, get into more of this encoding and reviewing what she ends up either sharing verbally or non-verbally, her reactions. It does tell you a little bit more about where her attention is. So, yeah, but is that helpful about episodic memory?
Yeah.
I don't know what you saw. I saw that you sent me a link of some sort. I know that I don't know. I'll look at what it is you sent me.
I had a blog post.
Oh, in the community center? Okay.
Yeah, in the community center. And I don't know, it was pretty easy to understand.
Oh, good. Okay. I was wondering, I'm like, oh gosh, I wonder what she saw.
But she did make it sound like in that post, like episodic memory can be related to and help with executive functioning. She didn't say executive functioning, but she said problem solving, which to me sounds more like executive functioning. But then I read in other places that they're not related at all.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look at that.
Problem solving, because it does kind of make sense that it would, because when we're in a situation that maybe we've been in before, we do reference those episodic memories, I would think, to go, oh, I was in this situation before, and this is what I did, and it did or didn't work out well, what am I going to do now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it would kind of affect that.
Well, it is related in a sense. Well, that's where the episodes, the episodic memory, the episodes, and then how that merges in. But he does talk about how that leads into mental time travel and that's where all of these things get put together. So if you have episodic memory, if you have something that you save as meaningful, and it comes up again, for you to mentally take yourself back there and go, oh yeah, that was like, not just reciting what you did, but recalling how you felt and how it impacted you. So like for me, it's my grandmother always made these like amazing blueberry muffins for me and my sister. And the smell of them would just evoke, like even now I just like, oh, it's like a good feeling, you know, you're just like, grandma, you know. So now if I were to smell those now, I would just have a lot of emotion. Like, these are my grandma's muffins, you know. But you can take yourself back in time that way. And he talks about how that this is connected to building experience-based knowledge and learning from your experiences, and how it ties into a bigger picture. here.
I would think everything would have to be.
It really does. Well, yeah.
When you read articles about it, it's like they compartmentalize everything. And that doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me.
Yeah. It's also very complex, and so but yeah, no. So I think just being aware of your experiences, including her where you can, modeling a lot of the things that you already know to do. When you spotlight, you want to spotlight things that you want to stand out. And so there might be some things in your day that you're like, wow, this is something I really want to remember at the end of the day. You would want to spotlight that or want her to remember at the end of the day. So I'm kind of thinking about it that way too. But yeah, if you want to record some things along these lines, that would be really helpful for me to see.
Okay.
Yeah. So much has evolved in the way that we learn about memory. And that's one of the great things about RDI, I guess, is that he's always adding and expanding based on the research. It's just really hard sometimes too. Sometimes we have to redo a lot of the things we already have. So it's like, okay, let me go through my stuff and make sure it's all, not that any of it's wrong, it's just expanded now. There's a lot more to it. Yeah. All right, well, have a good rest of the day.
You too.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Let's look at what we did today.
Today.
What did you do today? Do you remember?
Let's play. Yeah.
What did we do?
It's photo time. Let's go. Videos.
You want to look at the videos?
Let's go.
Can you remember what we did today? What did we do today? What did we do today? Let's look at what we did today.
Yeah.
Should be like DJ Lance Rock. Let's remember what we did today. DJ Lance Rock. Back on the show. All right. Let's see what we did today. You got a letter. You got a letter today. Can I help you up? You got a letter. A card. Then what happened? Then what happened? Who's that? Where was he? Where was he at? Oh, you went too far. do?
Let's. Yeah,
He was at school, huh?
it's Jack.
At OT? At Team for Kids?
When?
Then what? Oh, there he is again.
It's a lady. It's a lady.
Lenny.
Okay.
And then,
It's a picture. Companies.
yeah, you guys did some tracing with the ponies, huh? What we do next?
One.
What we do? Where are we?
Wow.
I wonder where we are. Do you remember? I wonder where we're at. And we took pictures together? That was funny, huh? Bye. You gonna help me watch video? I'll wait for you. Don't fall. Oh. Sit on my lap. Remember where we were at?
I see your tongue.
We were being silly, huh? We were at Starbucks, huh? What's that? Do you remember that? No. You were putting your hand out the window. You remember? You were on the wind. You wanna watch it? It's okay. I don't think you put your hand out again. I was just holding my phone. Then,
Sweet. Sweet.
after we got home, you showed me how to do your games, huh? Ooh, you did some good spelling. You were fast, huh? Then what we do? More games. Is that funny? He's funny, huh? Then what? Oh. Oh, you showed me another. What game is this? Makeup. Makeup, you're right. Oh, I realize that. No, it is makeup. Fitness girl. You showed me how to put on her eyeshadow. She did a bunch of dancing, I think. Oh, dress up. Show me how you dress up. Nice choice. Yeah. And what we do? Oh, then you showed me your fashion designer. You were making clothes. You designing clothes. That was pretty cool. Oh, we did the calendar, huh? We did the calendar. Now you're going back in time. Now that's Spirit Halloween. So that was everything we did today. That was a lot of stuff, huh? Was it fun?
Oh, me too. Oh, no.
Oh, you're gonna hurt your back. Was that fun today?
Me too.
Me too.
Okay. Love. I love you.
Oh, I love you.
Go, 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 go.